Hello and welcome to this Learn Live session, here from Ignite. I am in Seattle and the session is Configure and Manage Microsoft Teams Rooms and Teams Devices. My name is Ståle Hansen. I'm the CEO and Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway. I'm a Microsoft 365 MVP and you can reach me at Twitter at Ståle Hansen. I'm also joined here by Richard. Say hello, Richard.
Hey everyone, Richard Brynteson. I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota today. Also an MVP, apps and services, Microsoft Teams primarily, and you can also find me on Twitter at @rbrynteson on Twitter.
Fantastic. And we're also joined by Michael LaMontagne, and he's a Microsoft MVP. He will answer your questions, which means one thing. You can ask us anything. Michael will answer them, and he may even bubble up some questions to us, and we can answer them live. So make sure, if you have any specific questions, figure them out now and ask them, or if we say something you want us to elaborate on, please let Michael know. You can follow along the Learn session at aka.ms Learn Live 2022 10 12A or scan the QR code. So I will leave the slide open for like a couple of seconds more. And the goal for doing these Learn Live sessions is that you can answer the questions and get to know the content better by us explaining and talking about the content that's in the Learn session. The learning objectives for the session are standardizing and on a Teams room deployment, how to do that, how to plan your rooms, analyzing the criteria for the meeting spaces. Richard's going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the resource account and how well it's actually documented on learnmicrosoft.com. Manage device settings and firmware. Richard's going to walk you through that. And manage configuration profiles and Teams devices tag. We are also going to talk about some MTR on Windows troubleshooting scenarios. But Richard, what do we need to do for planning for a Teams room deployment?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look at the slides we have here. So the key thing is to plan your deployment. So many people simply just they rush out, they find something they like, and they just try to buy it and throw it in and hope that it's the right thing for their situation. So I think Ståle, you've still got the slide. So
yeah, Lauren, you need to change to Richard's screen.
There we go.
You.
Perfect. Awesome. So so when we talk about this planning for deployment, we're really looking at a few different items, right? You really want to envision what you're going to do. You need to think about how you're going to drive adoption. Simply throwing equipment into a room or on a desk doesn't mean someone's going to use it, right? It will become the coolest looking paperweight if you don't make some plans around it. So, and then how do you drive that? How do you, look at adoption and how do you maintain it? So those are the kind of those things you want to look at it holistically and not, like I said, just jump online and order the first thing you see, because usually that's where things go bad really quickly. So we're going to talk about this in a few different spaces. We want to talk about the spaces for your rooms, and there's a lot of things to think about, right? Like when people think about this, right, I want to think about what is going to be in front of the camera, what's around the cameras, right? In my space right now, right, I'm in a more open room. We can see it's Ståle's and it has a background in his room. So you want to think about where the camera is going to sit and all those kind of things. And you really want to then talk about also kind of, all encompassing. So it's not just, where is the camera? Where's my furniture, the mics, the cables, right? All these things kind of go into a successful room deployment. And then the last thing you want to think about then is, what are those goals, right? How do we document what is our intended goal? And if the goal is simply have people use the room, that's probably not a great goal. You want to be more specific about that. And sometimes asking those kind of questions to the business leaders is the hardest part right, of what your goals are. But if you do that, you'll get the most out of your room's experience.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I think what's important when you're planning out your room is make sure the sound in the room is good as well, or plan for sound dampening furniture, things on the wall, maybe some art, maybe some curtains, whatever that can like keep the sound in the proper way in the room, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the coolest looking rooms are all those all glass rooms, right?
Yeah,
But oftentimes the sound just kind of like bounces off of it and you end up with a really echoey experience. So
yeah.
trying to think of, if I have that glass room, what do I bring into the room to try to reduce some of that noise bouncing around? So, and sometimes it's as easy as like, I mean, I've done this at some deployments, literally walked into customers' conference rooms and just almost kind of yell in the room a little bit, right? You get a bunch of people talking at the same time just to hear how the noise bounces around in a room. A lot of people don't think about just trying to, simulate a little bit of chaos, right? Like the meetings that when one person only talks, those are the easy ones. It's when multiple people are talking, that's when you got to really start thinking about it. And when we talk about this rooms and the devices and whatnot, there's a huge library, right? If this was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we'd be talking about like just a couple of things in a shared space. But now we have all sorts of items. So you really want to think about where are we going to deploy, things like Teams displays outside the rooms with our panels. What are the conferencing equipment? And then what are the differences between Teams rooms on Android versus Teams room on Windows? Because there are some differences between them. And where does potentially things like Surface Hub kind of fit into that larger story? So there's a lot of pieces you want to think about when it comes into that. And the one great thing is Microsoft does let you literally purchase items directly from the store right inside the admin center now. But again, don't just rush in there and buy something first. Like it's just a recipe for things that are not going to go well. So I'm not going to go through every single bullet point here, right? There's a lot of words on the screen, but these are some of the common questions you want to be thinking about yourself, right? We talked about it already, right? Is the room made out of glass, right? Do you have dark room? Is it a bright room? How large is the room? And that'll kind of help drive certain things like what kind of cameras do we need to purchase, right? Zoom in or PTZ cameras, right? All these things can do that. And the last thing I always like to call out right away is just when you're doing all this, you should be thinking about where the cable is going to run. How are we going to get cables from point A to point B? Because a lot of times, again, people don't think about it from that perspective. And then the key piece then obviously is you want to document it all, right? Don't just throw it on a piece of paper, kind of come up with some different items that you can do so that you have them. So, what are those goals? Physical rooms. Is there a physical whiteboard in the room? Do you need to have a camera for content camera at that physical whiteboard? So it can really differ about how you're going to deal with it. And the other thing, we kind of talked about rooms, right? But the other piece is that ambient noise, right? Like, I don't know about you, Ståle. I've had some really horror experiences where like the air conditioning unit is literally right outside the door. And when they were planning it,
Yeah.
no one knew about it, right? And it kicks on that very first time.
Yeah, so in Norway though we don't have air condition
That's
typically.
true. That's true. Yeah.
So I feel that feels like a warm location problem, but
That is a warp. Yes, absolutely. All right. Heating
but I
problems,
do
maybe.
want to add to the whiteboard story, right? So if you want to have a content camera to capture that, if it's a physical one, but it also goes into planning your meetings. Is the room like prepared for what you want to present, and how are you going to present that, and make sure that you choose the correct room with the correct equipment as well, because I guess not all the rooms you have are equal.
Right. And you kind of you start thinking about, right, is this, to your point, right, is this kind of like a small breakout room where 2 or 3 people are going to go in there? Is this a larger room? We're going to gather quite a few people, right? So the size kind of dictates some of that kind of concept as well. We talk about kind of documenting it, right? And what you really want to do is you want to try to standardize on a set of rooms, right? And this is just an example. You could display it however you want, right? But the idea is if that in my example here, we've got these small focus rooms with a small number of people, so we're going to have certain types of camera and equipment for those rooms. So if I'm an end user and I'm going from room 1 to room 2, and they're both kind of focus rooms, we'll have roughly the same kind of equipment. So kind of having that standardization is really key for end users. Also, it just makes it easier for them to actually adopt the product if you're not changing the rules of the game every single time they go into a room. So the big thing for planning, right, is to think about 3 big things, right? 1, what is those room size? Try to standardize on items. 2, in today's world, you should probably expect for some product delays. So you're going to have to think about how you're going to handle that if you're removing a room and replacing it, or if this is net new, right? And then just how do you, adopt that standardized room for installation, right? If you're a large organization, you might be putting together packages of rooms and shipping them around the globe and having other people do that installation for you. So how do we monitor, document, and make sure all of that makes a ton of sense? So that's kind of the high level area, but the key element, right? If you plan something well, typically that deployment will go well. So don't skip over that planning portion. So Ståle, we've planned some stuff. What do we do now?
Yeah, we need to look at the accounts you're going to use. So Laurent, if you can switch to my screen, let's talk about the resource accounts you're going to use for the Teams rooms. And first off, we need to talk about licensing, because you need to have licensing for these rooms. And it's not good enough anymore to use an E3 license, E5 license, because it has the feature set. Microsoft actually is looking into this now and will give you a warning in the Teams Admin Center if you don't have a Teams rooms license. And today you have 2 types of Teams room license. You have the basic and the pro license. The basic is actually free. How cool is that? Up to 25 devices. But it's limited. It's limited in functionality. It's limited in administration as well. So it's more like kind of, the basic, if you have 1 or 2 rooms and you want to have the room up and running, but still you do want to go to the pro license. And the pro license gives you all the features, and especially now at Ignite, all the new announcements around Teams rooms, all those new features will come to the pro license. So if you today have the standard license, which was the normal license before they switched to Teams Room Pro, that's also a type of license that's in maintenance mode, and you can't buy it anymore. So either, if you are under 25 rooms, you can go to the basic license, but the recommendation is to go for the pro license, because you have Intune or Azure AD P1, you have the proper Teams licensing, you have audio conferencing, and especially around the Intune and Azure AD P1, you will be able to connect a room in a proper way to your cloud account, which is Teams and Exchange Online, so that it adheres to your conditional access settings. And then you're thinking, you're having a question right now, maybe asking Michael already, why is there no Intune in the basic license? Because you still have security, you still have conditional access and controlling what can log into your environment. Well, that's not in the basic license, so be aware of that. What you can do, though, you can add the Azure Premium Plan 1 license. You can add the Intune license, the additional licenses, but you still need the Teams Room basic license assigned to the room so that it is identified as a room license. So you can add them, but the recommendation is definitely go to the Pro license.
We're going to talk. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. I was going to say, I was going to ask a real quick question. So one of the things I get asked all the time, if I've got 30 rooms, can I get more basic licenses, or do I need to then have to purchase them?
That's a no. So you can't get more.
Right, exactly. I get asked that question all the time. Why can't I just get a few more, right?
No.
So that's the key.
Yeah, I feel it, and it's also doesn't even feel like a trial. It feels like, okay, you can connect your room, you get it, but you don't get the full feature set even. So go for the pro license is the clear recommendation here. The resource account is either an existing room an Exchange room, for instance, that you already have for booking the meeting room, or you create a new account. So it's all about creating the account, configure mailbox properties because you're going to invite. You need to have the calendar set up. You need to turn off password expiration because, again, if it's an existing account, it's probably a disabled account as well, where you, if it's a pure Exchange online account for a resource account, a room account, so you want to give it a password, turn off password expiration, and of course enable the account as well. And then of course assign the meeting room license. You can do this through the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and you can do it through PowerShell. And the cool thing is to do it through PowerShell, of course, because then you can create a standard around it and you can automate it. So either you create a new room from scratch, where you use the new mailbox commandlet, where you define the room name and what kind of type it is. And again, this is in the Exchange PowerShell. So we are not in Teams PowerShell right now. We are in Exchange PowerShell, and we are setting this password, and we enable the account as well. So here you see that we want to have some specific definitions here: the email address, the name of it, which can be different from the email address. We want to add the password, and we want to set it to enabled. If you are configuring an existing calendar account, a room account, then you may want to then enable it and set a password and set it to never expire. But there are some shared activities that you need to do as well, because especially if it's an existing room, you may need to go in and configure the calendar processing settings. And one common issue is delete comments is set to true on an existing room. This needs to be set to false, because that's where the Teams meeting information resides. So if you delete comments, you may not be able to see the meeting join link on the Teams room. And also, I want to highlight here the process external meeting messages. And this is needed if you want to forward an external meeting invite to the room, because what happens when you forward the invitation is that if I get an invitation from Richard and I'm going to forward this to my room, I'm telling Richard's Exchange server or Exchange Online that, hey, can you invite this account as well? And an invitation will go directly to the room. So if for that to work, you need to turn on process external meeting messages. You can choose not to do it. Is it a security risk? I wouldn't say so, as long as you are aware of it. That the worst case is that someone can block your room by sending lots of invites, but they do need to know the email address. They need to know how to invite it, and so on and so forth. So and you can always delete those and turn it off if something should happen. I don't know, Richard. I don't if you have been had customers that had issues with this.
No, I think we always encourage our customers to turn it on, because it also helps when people are trying to join just with the Teams client as well, right? It lights up that join button inside of the Teams client from the calendar perspective. That's typically where I see the issue, right? Is they don't have things turned on with this and other things where they're forwarding accounts and then the join button doesn't show up correctly. So you kind of get some kind of weird just user experiences, right? When you kind of have that how you're doing the process in the meeting and stuff. The other question I had for you, Ståle, that people always ask, so you were talking about the Microsoft Admin Center the entire time. If I go to the Teams Admin Center, there's a resource account item on the left-hand side. Is that the same thing, or are they completely different items? Right?
Yeah, that's completely different.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Has nothing to do with Teams rooms, right?
No, not at all, right? So people see the name resource account though, and they're just like, they assume, resource account, that's where I need to go to set this up.
Yeah. No, maybe it should be called room account instead, right?
Yeah, something else. But yeah, they're two very different things. So don't get confused when you see names being reused. Microsoft has never reused the same name in two places, so that's always a good thing for
never.
us.
Yeah.
Never. All right, cool.
Yeah. So and for licensing, earlier before when we had the Sky for Business PowerShell commandlets available, then you would go in and enable meeting room running that commandlet. That's not available anymore. So all you need to do actually is to assign the license, and the recommendation is always use group-based licensing. So you just add the room to a group, which then assigns the Teams room license to the account, and that's all you need to do. And again, make sure that you can the password has never expires set on it. There is a very good documentation on learnmicrosoft.com, and I would highly recommend that you go to it. The link is in the slide as well, because they do have like how to do it in the admin center, how to do it in Exchange Online, how to do it on Exchange Server even, and also how do you modify an existing room, and everything is documented. And what I really like, it's documented through PowerShell. I think that's the best way to like create a routine around this, because it may not be every day you are enabling a Teams room, and having it through PowerShell as a routine, then you don't have to like reinvent the routine every time. So I highly recommend going to learnmicrosoft.com here. It's very good documentation.
Agreed. And we talked about standardizing rooms before, right? So you should standardize that deployment process, right?
Yeah.
Through PowerShell.
Don't forget external processing, or don't forget like all the little things, because it's so difficult to troubleshoot later.
Yep.
All right. So we've been talking about Teams rooms and accounts. How do we provision a new device? And I guess we're talking about phone devices here now.
Yep, exactly. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about doing, how do we remote provision and sign in devices? And I think that's the key term there, right? It's remote provisioning. So unlike the old days where you had to do everything externally, you had to run around sneakernet all the time, you have the ability inside the Teams admin center to remote provision and sign in your Microsoft Teams device, which is fantastic. And it really boils down into these 4 or 5 kind of high level steps, right? We're going to add our device via MAC address into Teams, right? We can do that either one by one, which if you were doing onesie twosies, that's cool, or you can upload an entire file of MAC addresses and do a large collection. So that's kind of that first step, and that's kind of critical. The second, we'll talk about the verification code. We'll then talk about provisioning the device, and then we'll talk about that first-time remote sign-in and the Intune device. So it kind of breaks down into those 5 kind of large buckets. So if I was doing this, the very first thing I would do is from the Teams admin center up under actions, we have provision devices. So I can go ahead and provision those devices from there. So that happens from that perspective. I don't want to run away from this. Ståle, you got a question in the chat back in the previous section about
so a follow-up question here. Yeah. What happens to existing rooms that are licensed for Teams Room Standard and hasn't migrated to Pro yet? So nothing will happen. You will still have those licenses. It's just that you can't buy new licenses, and also new features that are maybe announced here at Ignite or in the future may not come to these rooms. But nothing will happen with these licenses. There is a caveat to that as well. If you have an enterprise agreement, for instance, you can still buy standard licenses as long as that agreement is active. But at the time of renewal, you then need to go over to Pro licenses. If you have a CSP, a monthly renewal, for instance, then you will need to go over to Pro licenses and buy Pro licenses when you need to buy new licenses.
Yep.
So yeah.
And thankfully, I mean, there's time, right? So most people, if you're in an EA, you probably have a little bit of time to make that transition. Hopefully, it's not happening like tomorrow or something like that.
No, but what will happen though, if you're using E3 or E5, that will stop working July next year.
Correct.
July 2023. So don't use E3 or E5 licenses or other types of licenses than MTR licenses for this.
Yep. All right, that was a fantastic question. All right, so we'll jump back in. We've got our devices, we've provisioned them, we've purchased them, right? We want to, the first thing we want to do is we want to provision that device. So from the admin center, we can choose provision devices, and here's where we're going to have that process. We're going to add the MAC address. So again, we can enter them one at a time or several at a time, and then we're going to come out of it. On the back end, then we're going to generate this verification code. And what the verification code is doing is it's registering that device into your Office 365 environment or your M365 environment. That way, it's more than just just a MAC address. You need to take that extra step to ensure that the device actually belongs to that environment. It's just kind of one of those kind of moments of security for you and the organization. And you can do that one of two ways, right? You'll see it on the screen, or you can take the MAC addresses and the verification codes. If you're sending this off to a bunch of field technicians, maybe you've got someone at a remote office who's deploying 500 phones, you could give them that list of here's the MAC addresses, here are the verification codes for each phone, so that they can walk through that process. It can take a little bit of time, but doing some of this on the front end does kind of just make it easier for that field technician on the far end. So.
Yeah, and also they don't need to run around with the passwords, right?
Right, exactly. That's kind of the hope, right? So when the device is powered on, then they'll see this, and they can pick to provision the device, and it goes from there. And once the device has been provisioned in the Teams Admin Center, it goes from awaiting activation into awaiting sign-in. So the device will come signed out by default, so that when the end user comes up to it, they can go through that sign-in process with it, but it'll be completely configured for your organization. So any of the settings you might have, the configuration policies you might have deployed, all those items would already be set up for them. So you don't have to kind of hop through those hoops. And the last one, I'll leave this on the screen for half a second. It's kind of in a weird spot, but I wanted to call it out, right, when we talk about deploying devices, that your Teams rooms for Windows, right, have a Windows 10 image on them still. And if you want to enroll them in Intune, right, you want to scan this QR code, because it'll teach you or show you how to go ahead and do that enrollment process, and also how to do a bulk enrollment, right? Again, we talk about, lots of devices. It could take some time if you're trying to do them one at a time, for example. So.
Yep. I have a question for you, Richard.
Yeah.
The remote sign-in, is that Teams phone on Android, or is it also MTR on Android?
So it's Teams Room for Android for sure, or the Teams phone, excuse me. I'm pretty sure it's on the. Now you're. I'm trying to think the differences between Windows and Android. I'm pretty sure it's on the Android one for the Teams rooms as well. So
Yep.
It's a kind of across the board from that. I was going through the mental list of all the things that are different between Android and the Windows one, right? And if you are looking for that, Microsoft does have a great documentation that explains all the feature set differences for the Teams Room systems on Android versus Windows. The list is getting smaller and smaller every day. Last time I looked, I think it was only like 3 or 4 check marks that existed on one versus the other. So the trying to bring those devices together in terms of feature and functionality.
And there's also a list that states which devices support remote sign-in. So you should go and confirm that and search for that remote sign-in, Teams rooms, or Teams phones.
Yep. So we've spent a lot of time talking about phones, and it would be wrong for us to not talk about SIP gateway devices. So at a high level, right, there are 2 types of phones that exist in the ecosystem. You have your Teams certified phones that are running Android or Windows for meeting rooms, right? But they're running a Teams client, right? So they are going to connect via that Teams client running on the phone. The second piece you might have in your environment are older SIP generic phones, right? Or maybe you had 3-pip phones that you used in Skype for Business that you want to be able to connect to Microsoft Teams. So the great thing is Microsoft gives you options for them. And the first thing I gotta say right now is if you do have a phone that you're using as a 3-pip device, right? So that is a phone like a Polycom and audio codes that's going through the 3 pips. They logged in the old Skype for Business method. That service is being discontinued. So you want to make sure that you have those phones and you migrate them from a 3-pip service to the SIP gateway. There are some differences on the end user experience, but that gives you a long-term solution for your phones versus that short-term Skype for Business only 3-pip environment. And that's really important. Don't wait till
and just
last minute.
3-pip, what does that stand for, Richard?
It's the program I always forget what it stands for.
Yeah, it's a third-party IP phone.
Third party, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I always just said 3-pip all the time. Yeah, it's it's the phones that were compatible with Skype for Business.
Right.
So we talk about this idea of a SIP gateway, and it allows you to use any SIP compatible device. And what's great is if you were to look at that old list of phones compared to the new list of phones that are available for SIP gateway, there's a lot more devices, including things like Cisco native devices that you can license Cisco phones and have them connect to Microsoft Teams directly. So knowing that that's an option is really important because it lets you kind of hold that investment in your environment. So the reasons you want to use the SIP gateway, I mean, obviously first, if you have a device that's available and eligible, then you don't need to replace that device right away. So when you're talking about how do I save my investment, I want to move from this legacy PBX environment to Microsoft Teams. You may not have the capital to move all the devices at the same time. So we can do things, obviously can make phone calls, receive phone calls, set the device into do not disturb, and the key phrase there is the device into do not disturb. So if I go D&D on my SIP gateway device, it's not going to change my presence in Teams, right? So I'm really just saying I want this phone not to ring itself. Hold, resume, voicemail, all those kind of things can be done from it. And then we also have things like your message waiting lights, your call transfers, local call forwarding. Again, it says local because we're going to forward at the local device. And one thing that's not listed here is some phones do support 911 and dynamic emergency 911 calling from that SIP gateway device. So make sure to look at the list of all the phones and see if your phone on a specific firmware supports E911. Not all of them do, so it's kind of important to kind of call out and look at that list to make sure you have the right ones. Whoop. So what we want to do real quick is we want to jump to a video of kind of going through this process so you can kind of see what a phone looks like when it's going through the registration process. So what we have here is we have an audio codes phone that we're just going to log into real quick. And inside the audio codes phone, the very first thing that we need to do is we need to set the URL for provisioning. So by default, it's going to be set to DHCP. You can change it. You can deploy the DHCP options to your environment, right? Or if you had 1 or 2 phones you wanted to test, you can manually set it. So in this case, I'm just going to manually set it. And Microsoft has a list of the SIP gateway environments, and there's different ones for each region. There are 3, so you want to make sure you pick the right one based on your Office 365 tenant. So we're going to go ahead and paste that in here real quick, and then we're going to save this option, and then we're going to check for updates. And what's going to happen as soon as we hit that check for updates, it's going to tell us that something was found. And if we jumped and looked at the phone real quick, which my video is going to magically do for us, we'll see that the phone is restarting and we're updating that configuration. So the phone is going to reboot a bunch of times. That's why we're not doing this live. This is a solid 5-minute process of watching it reboot. If you're going to do it, do more than one at a time is basically what I'm saying. The next thing you want to do, and I'm calling this out for audio codes because it's super specific to audio codes, you've got to ensure that the time on your phone is accurate. So in my case, we have daylight savings time here in the United States. The phone did not have any of that daylight savings, so it's an hour off for the time. And the reason why this is valuable is I'm going to try to log into Office 365. I'm going to be an hour off, so when the token comes to me, it's going to look like it's expired already. So you've got to make sure that you get the time set correctly. So in this case here, we're just setting the time real quickly so you have it. So now we're going to go into that Teams Admin Center. We're going to jump down to the SIP gateway, and here we're going to see that idea of we're going to provision a device. So we're going to come to provision device, and it's going to pop up, and we're going to enter our MAC address here and hit save. And then you are going to see the device that is waiting for a validation code. So we generate that code. Again, I could send this out to a field technician if I wanted to. And now we need to go ahead and we need to do that registration process. And what you do on the phone is kind of weird. You do *55 followed by a star in that 6-digit code. So in this case here, right, you can see that I'm typing out that 55 in the code example. I dial it, and the phone goes ahead, connects to Microsoft servers, and does that validation. So if I look in the Teams Admin Center, we're no longer waiting for activation. We're waiting for sign in now at this point in time, which is great. Here, I'm just going to sign in as a user just locally. So I just click on the Microsoft device login, and it's going to ask me for my generation code. So literally all I have to do is put the code in for the phone, sign in as my user. I hit sign in, and it's done. The phone is logged in as me. So, and what's great is how the tokens work. It has refresh tokens, so it's not like you need to go back and re-log into the phone every 2 hours or 5 days or weeks or whatever the case is. As long as the phone is powered on, it will continue to refresh tokens and do its thing. So, and that process you saw for the SIP gateway, super similar to just provisioning a normal phone as well. So kind of fits both kind of experiences. All right, Ståle, anything?
No, I think this is really good, and SIP gateway is the way moving forward for these standard phones, maybe for your common area phones, those who are like in areas where you have not individual users, but you have a shared account.
Yeah.
And also what we have seen is that it's more stable than the old Scar for Business interop service.
Yep.
So because we have seen that in the old servers, the phones signed out all the time.
Yeah.
And here the SIP gateway, it's more stable. Is my experience at least.
Yeah, and there's two other things I just want to call out really quick. Is that first, you do want to make sure that you look at the version of the firmware that's on your device. There's an approved list, so you want to make sure that you have the approved list or the approved version. And the second thing, Ståle kind of hinted at it, right? Like, this is a good device for those common area phones, and it can be a short-term solution for end users as well. But there's a lot of features you get in Teams native devices that you don't get inside of the SIP gateway. So having those two is kind of important. So the question from the audience, any date when the SIP gateway will be available for GCC users? I don't recall seeing a date. Ståle, do you recall seeing one? I don't remember seeing one, honestly.
Nope, I haven't seen one either, and that's definitely something we can see if we can figure out here at the Ignite. So I will check.
Okay, cool. The other question, and maybe you've got a good answer, that how are orgs handling password rotations on hundreds of MTRs? You said it a few times, but you want to grab that one?
Yeah, so what we do is that password never expires.
Correct. Yeah, that's the key element, right? Don't let them expire, right? Like, and the beauty of it is, I mean, you're going to use that password, what, one time in your life kind of thing. You know, go nuts, make it your 25-character super long password, and just flush it from your memory.
Yeah, and that's specifically for Teams rooms on Windows.
Correct.
Teams room on Android, you can sign in remote, so you don't have to share the password.
Yep.
And but you need to then trust the people that are deploying the rooms, making sure that they don't share the password anywhere. So we don't rotate the passwords. And I know there's a setting in Teams rooms for Windows though that says rotate password, or it did say that. That doesn't do that.
No, it really doesn't. No. And obviously that might cause some heartache with security teams, right? Like I've had that conversation a bunch of times. So you just kind of have to be forward with them and tell them kind of here's how it's going to work, and have that conversation right away. Don't blindside your security group by telling them you need 500 accounts suddenly disabled for password expiration.
Yes.
Probably won't work out well. All right. All right, cool. So the next thing we want to do is Ståle is going to talk a little bit about how to manage devices with the Teams Pro portal or the Pro
Yes.
portal.
So, but still, you are still managing devices in the Teams Admin Center. And in order to do that, you have 3 types of roles that can do it. You can use a global administrator, not recommended. You should always use this privilege access. You can use the Teams administrator. That's also not recommended unless you are like that Teams person. But sometimes you want to delegate management of the devices to maybe some room people or people that only should have access to managing the devices, and that's the Teams device administrator. So if you can get away with the Teams device administrator, then you will only see, as you see in the picture here, you will only see the devices that you can manage. And then the next question you have, can we then manage only the devices in a specific location? No, you can't. So you get access to all the devices in a global deployment, for instance. There's one added activity here, because specifically on Teams rooms, you want to see like the call history of the room, like how many meetings it has been part of, and all that. And then Teams device administrator don't give you that, but then you can combine it with the Teams support engineer role. Or the support expert that can give you insights into how the room is used, but it doesn't give you more insights into the rest of the platform. But what you can do, especially on phones, we are looking at phones here first. You can manage the software updates. You can do some reboots. You can add device tags. You can change settings, and specifically changing like time zone and how the device should behave. You can do that from the Teams Admin Center, and definitely for phones, that still happens in the Teams Admin Center. And then you have Teams rooms, the devices. And here you have some capabilities. I'm thinking especially restart device is important. If you have rolled out new setting, for instance, it won't take effect until you have restarted the device. But if you want to see meeting activity and meeting details, that's where you need the added functionality, added feature that the Teams support engineer role can give you in addition to the Teams device administrator role. So if you want to go and manage your devices, you can change some information, you can add some settings. But what's very interesting here is the Teams Rooms Pro Management Portal, because this is new and the added benefit of having the Pro license. And I've been talking to a lot of customers about this. And they're actually very, very positive to getting access to this more advanced way of managing the devices. Because what you get is you get some intelligence about the stability of the room. If it can give you some tips on how to fix a health issue, maybe it will even try to do some like of the basic stuff that it can do remote for you using AI to do that. But also what you will get is enhanced insights of room usage. So you get more insights and more reports that how the room is used, and also when you soon will get the ability to count the number of people in the room. That's the kind of information that goes into this portal as well. And the best of all is update rings. So especially for Teams rooms, that's important, because then you can test it for a couple of rooms before you update the whole bunch of the rooms. So update rings is something a lot of customers have been waiting for. This is available for Teams Room Pro license. And if you're looking from a management perspective, The Teams Rooms Pro license, this is where it really shines because it gives you additional capabilities in terms of monitoring and alerting as well, but the update rings and enhanced insights. So you will actually get a lot out of the box here. So what's important is that it is an additional portal, and I do believe Microsoft has an intention of bringing this into the Teams Admin Center. But for now, this is like the first iteration of this license. This is, of course, the version of the portal that were the managed services license before. Now you get access to this with the Pro license. And here is where you add the update rings, for instance. If you go back to the initial screenshot here, in order to get started with the Pro license, you need to actually install, especially on the Teams rooms on Windows, you need to install this agent that signs it into this portal. And my impression is as well that Teams rooms on Android will also come into this portal in time. But for now, it's Teams rooms on Windows devices that benefit from this portal. But Microsoft roadmap is definitely to bring in Android devices as well. So the portal prerequisites is that it Teams rooms on Windows and you have a Pro license. You have rolled out the agent that registers it to the portal. And of course, you need to use like proper networking, have it sign in, and so on. So go in and look at the Teams rooms requirements. You scan the QR code as well for that.
Cool. And I think one thing I remember seeing, I think I saw it on Twitter, that that agent on the Windows devices is going to be built into it eventually, so that as you're buying new one, you're not going to have to go back and try to reinstall it, right? So that's the first thing. And then the second one, you kind of hinted at it, right? I had a portal before with that standard license. This one's different, right? So it's kind of like we're moving from point A to point B from that portal experience. So I always like to call that out because some people kind of get yet another portal syndrome almost.
Yeah. So, but in time though, I think they will unify.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so the next thing we want to do, jump over to my slides. We're going to talk real quick about managing and configuring profiles. We're not going to spend a ton of time here, but we do want to call out a couple of things. So Microsoft gives you the ability to create configuration profiles that you can then go apply to a group of devices in your environment. And these could be things from like backgrounds to how we lock the devices, those type of things. And if you think about it, you might have an opportunity where in the Pro, you have those rings for testing devices, right? You might end up with configuration profiles that are almost mirroring those rings concepts, right? So you might have some things that you test them out before you roll them out to that broader group of people. So you can see on the screen some of the things you can set from time zone and formats, and just different types of meeting profiles and stuff like that. That's really important to understand what's going to happen. So when you complete, all you need to do, didn't mean to hit, you just go in and you create that profile, and then you go ahead and select the device types, and then those are in the Teams Admin Center. You go ahead to the devices, you go to the configuration profile, and then you simply create the profile and then assign it to the devices you want. Like, it's as straightforward as it sounds. So it's really hard to, like, I don't know how I'd take more time to explain it, but create profile, assign profile. It's kind of the pretty straightforward process in it. And then here's that exam where we're doing the configuration and assign it to it. The second piece around this is you have both configuration profiles, but you also have this idea of being able to tag devices. And this is incredibly important for those large organizations that has hundreds of devices around the environment. I might want to create tags so that in the Teams Admin Center, I can quickly filter out and see the devices I'm looking for. Ståle mentioned, right, even if I've got that team device administrator role, I'm still going to see them all, but maybe I just want to manage the items that are in the EU, for example. I could create a tag and go ahead and assign that tag to all of my EU devices, and that way it's really easy for me to go ahead and pull it up. And the other great thing is you can have multiple tags on a device, so if you wanted to, you can kind of filter and slice and dice them in a lot of different ways from a management perspective. So it's really just it's an admin ease of use kind of thing. You don't see anything on the devices or anything like that, right? It's strictly just from the admin center. So it's really easy. You come in, right under actions, you've got the device tags near provisioned devices, and it's that same kind of process. You create the tag, and then you just go ahead and you apply it. And then we saw this before where you can kind of filter against them. So it's, again, a really useful way to go ahead and do stuff. So let's talk a little bit about troubleshooting Teams rooms, Ståle. Obviously, things can go wrong in a deployment. So how do we go about trying to troubleshoot them, or what are some of the common things we see?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can switch to my slides then, Lauren. So there are issues that you can come across with Teams rooms, and let's talk about some of the common issues. We have 9 minutes left, so let's dive into some of them. So the first issue here is the Teams room app isn't up to date, and we get this a lot actually. And just remember that it is a global rollout and a lazy rollout as well of the updates of the app. So even though you haven't gotten the update yet, you can go in and force the update, especially on the Windows devices. You can log in and go to the Microsoft Store and see if you have gotten the update, but it may be that it hasn't been deployed for your region yet or for your devices. Isn't that right, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, I always think of it like the Teams client, right? I could have one version, the person next to me might have one that's 2 days older or something like that. So just kind of knowing that can happen.
Yeah, and if it won't update at all, do the recovery tool. I haven't seen that much though.
Yeah,
that you do a full reinstall. The app will come.
Yeah, I think I've used the recovery tool once on a lot of devices. So that's usually kind of the sledgehammer approach to solving things.
But this is where the Pro portal comes into play, right? Because then you can start testing the rollout of, you have more control over the app version on the devices with the deployment rings. So deployment rings is something we have been asking for a long time. Now it's here with the Pro license. So I think that's like the reason number one why you want to go to the Pro license as soon as possible.
I think of all the times that the C-level suite MTR received the update before everyone else's, and it's slightly different. And that's where the panic comes from, because the CEO's room is now different than everyone else's.
Exactly. So they are lowest on the list, unless they have been at Ignite and want like the latest and greatest, right?
Right.
Okay, the resource account can't sign in to Teams, and this is a fun one. So of course, I think especially around the Android-based devices, you need to know that these are Android-based devices, which means that if you're using conditional access and Intune and so on, you need to create a different profile for the Teams rooms. So and the phones as well, because they will be captured by the Android profile you have for your phones. And that doesn't work. They won't be compliant because they don't have the same settings as a normal Android phone. So this is the biggest issue we see is when these devices can't sign in, is because they are captured by the profiles or the conditional access profiles that you have for your regular devices. And that goes to the Windows-based devices as well, that these are not fully Windows devices as well, so they won't be as compliant as your PCs. So keep that in mind. Also, of course, they are dependent on being able to resolve internet, right? Because Teams is an internet-facing service, and also for Exchange, it resides on Exchange Online. So you need to be able to resolve DNS, be able to do the connections, and I do believe that you can go and check by logging into the Teams room on Windows, log in and see if you can connect to Teams, or go to connection.office.com and test the connectivity. Next is video image is blurry, colors aren't correct, or just doesn't look right. Check your display.
Check the internet.
Yeah.
Upload speed's important.
Right. Next, displays don't turn on automatically, so make sure you're not using consumer-based displays. Make sure they support CEC or PC power on commands, so that they will start when your device starts as well. Video is choppy or low resolution. The resource account keeps signing in and out, or audio has echoes, stutters, or drops. What do you think this is, Richard?
It's always the network. Isn't it always the network? That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Always the
Yes.
network.
Network. It could be the firewall. It could be the traffic doesn't go directly out on the internet. So follow the normal Teams recommendations around network connectivity. We want to connect as directly as possible. And again, go to connectivityoffice.com, log into the Teams room on Windows device, and run that to see the stats. Because I love that tool, because it gives us the stats we are looking for within the platform. So it will tell you if you have packet loss. It will tell you if you have too much latency or jitter. So yeah, look for that.
Yeah, and the network team will always say it's not their fault. Let's just be very clear. I don't think I've ever met anyone on the network team that's like, oh yeah, it's definitely us. So
Yeah.
you might have to do a little bit of digging to prove, hey, here's the issue, right? And there are things you can do. You can subnet them off, set up QoS, right? These are all very good things to do from a best practice, just to kind of segment traffic sometimes.
Yep. And you can actually put this on the internet because they don't. It turns out that Teams and Exchange Online are internet-based services, so you don't actually have to have them in your local network. So you can segment them out, as Richard said. So it should, if it's a Windows-based device as well, it should not be joined to your local domain, because it has nothing to do there. It actually will introduce more issues for you. If you get a GPO that's designed for a PC, that may be an issue for the MTR, for instance. So yeah, you can actually segment them completely out and have them go directly to Teams, and then use Intune and conditional access in order to secure the account.
Yeah, that GPO hammer is like one of the #1 things I see happen on Windows Teams rooms, right? Like they have the GPO, it's built for everyone else's computer, and it destroys that MTR experience.
Yeah, and it's highlighted here as well. Like, don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, exactly.
These are cloud devices and should be handled as cloud devices.
Yep. All right.
So I think that's it. We do have some knowledge checks, but we are out of time. I hear the Oscar music playing. We have been talking about how to standardize on Teams room deployment, consider the right criteria when analyzing various meeting spaces. We talked about the resource account. The documentation on learn-microsoft.com is actually beautiful. It's like I should have written it myself. And manage device settings and firmware we can do in the Teams Admin Center, manage configuration profiles, and use Teams device tag. And we're going to leave you with go for the Teams Pro license.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and if you've got questions, Ståle and I are both reachable via Twitter, so hit us up with questions. We're happy to answer those on Twitter for sure. I think there's a call to action slide on the end, isn't there? One more.
Yeah, complete the learning.
There it is. Yeah, complete the learning. Go take it.
And give it a 5-star and get the points.
Yes.
Right, for your profile.
Gamification of everything. Yep.
Agreed. Yes. So with that, thank you very much.